If you ever wanted to see how much power a single viral video really has in Donald Trump's America, you don't need a theory. You have Minnesota. In the week between Christmas and New Year's, a 43-minute YouTube-style investigation by a 23-year-old conservative creator didn't just go viral. It froze hundreds of millions of dollars in child care money, triggered raids by federal agents, and pushed the White House into another emergency. Narrative. One clip, 1 week, and suddenly thousands of families in one state are wondering if the government will still help pay for their daycare. That is not an algorithm story anymore. That is power. The video itself is classic MAGA online content. The creator, Nick Shirley, is a self-described citizen journalist who has built an audience over the last 2 years by posting long, rough-cut exposés that feed straight into Trump-era talking points. In this latest piece, filmed around Minneapolis in mid-December, he walks up to Somali-run child care and autism centers, knocks on doors, and films what happens when nobody answers or when staff refuse to show him any children. His on-camera partner, identified only as David, claims they have uncovered the biggest fraud in American history. Dozens of daycare and autism facilities allegedly billing millions in public funds while providing no care at all. On their own, those kinds of claims are not new. Minnesota has had real fraud scandals in public assistance programs, including a pandemic-era scheme that stole nearly $250 million from a childhood nutrition program and separate prosecutions over Medicaid-funded autism services. State officials say they have spent years tightening oversight, prosecuting cases, and trying to separate genuine abuse from conspiracy theories. What is new is what happened next. Shirley released a teaser clip on X on December 23, then dropped the full 43-minute video a few days later. The platform's counters exploded. Within days, the video racked up more than 100 million views across YouTube, X, and other sites, amplified by MAGA influencers and right-wing media. The White House was watching. Trump's second term has built an unusually tight feedback loop between viral content and high-level decisions. According to the New York Times, senior aides treat creators like Shirley as both scouts and soldiers. They surface stories that fit the president's narrative, and they get rewarded with reposts, access, and policy reactions that send a clear message. Make our enemies look corrupt, and we'll make you famous. In this case, the reward came fast. Within 24 hours of the full video going up, the Department of Homeland Security's investigative arm had agents on the ground in Minneapolis visiting many of the facilities shown in the footage. Then came the real shock. The money spigot was turned off. Deputy Health and Human Services Secretary Jim O'Neill announced on X that the Trump administration had frozen all federal child care payments to the state of Minnesota, citing blatant fraud that appears to be rampant in Minnesota and across the country. He said HHS had identified the centers mentioned in the viral video and was demanding Governor Tim Walz carry out a comprehensive audit of their attendance records, licenses, complaints, investigations, and inspections. We have turned off the money spigot, and we are finding the fraud, he wrote. That is an extraordinary step. These funds aren't some obscure grant. They are the backbone of daycare for low and middle-income families across the state, funneled through the Federal Child Care and Development Fund. Freezing them statewide on the basis of one online video is the kind of move previous administrations would have considered after months of audits and inspector general reports, not after a week of viral engagement. Minnesota's governor called it outrageous. The Trump administration is threatening funding for the essential child care services that countless families across Minnesota rely on, apparently all on the basis of one video on social media. Walz said in a statement, "Fraud is unacceptable and individuals responsible for it should be prosecuted, but punishing every child and parent in the state because of an unverified YouTube video is reckless." And it wasn't just Minnesota. Within days, O'Neill signaled that HHS would tighten rules nationwide, saying that for all states, child care payments from the Administration for Children and Families would now require detailed justifications and photo or receipt high-level proof. ABC News reports that the department is effectively moving toward a national slow-motion freeze, where money does not flow until states meet new paperwork demands inspired by the Minnesota video. The DHS raids, the HHS freeze, and the signal that more crackdowns are coming together form a clear pattern. The Trump administration took a story built for clicks and treated it as the foundation for a federal war on daycare fraud. The most revealing part is that the underlying video has serious gaps. Shirley and David are never shown inside the daycare rooms. They do not have access to internal billing records. In several cases, they simply film locked doors during what may not be operating hours, or staff who refuse to let a stranger with a camera roam the premises, something many parents would actually expect providers to do for safety. Minnesota officials have publicly disputed the video's broad claims, saying that while the state has uncovered fraud in the past and is still investigating some facilities, there is no evidence of a vast network of ghost daycares stealing millions without serving any children. From an investigator's perspective, that makes Shirley's footage a lead, not a verdict. From Trump's perspective, it is a narrative jackpot. It combines several of his favorite themes: alleged corruption in Democratic-run states, immigration in Somali communities, rampant fraud in welfare programs, and a chance to attack the radical left over child care spending. South Dakota Governor turned DHS Secretary Christie. Noam amplified the story by posting that Homeland Security investigations agents were on the ground in Minneapolis right now, conducting a massive investigation on child care and other rampant fraud. The White House gets a dramatic visual, raids tape agents to match the viral clip. The fact that state officials call the allegations exaggerated or wrong becomes part of the script. Of course, the Democrat governor says nothing's wrong. Zoom out, and this fits neatly into what Al Jazeera has called Trump's year of emergency, invasion, and narco-terrorism. In 2025, the president leaned constantly on emergency language to justify aggressive moves on the border, on tariffs, and on crime. Now, child care is getting pulled into the emergency frame. The message to his base is straightforward. Everywhere you look, the border, big cities, welfare programs, even autism clinics. The system is being exploited, and only Trump is willing to shut off the money and send in the feds. For families who rely on subsidies to keep working, the message feels different. Your daycare bill is now collateral damage in a content war. You never asked to join. For creators, the lesson is just as stark. The Times describes a symbiotic relationship between the Trump administration and self-styled citizen journalists, where the White House amplifies and reacts to videos that fit its storyline, and in return, those creators gain huge audiences and political clout. Shirley is now more than a YouTuber. He is a man whose uploads can move federal money. That is intoxicating power. The risk is obvious when views and outrage become the key to agenda setting. The incentive is always to make the next video bigger, more shocking, less nuanced. In a normal investigative process, editors and lawyers ask, do we have enough evidence? In a virality loop, the only question is, will this blow up? The Minnesota case shows how thin the line between those two worlds has become. HHS has not yet presented a detailed audit of the centers in Shirley's video. DHS has not yet publicly accused specific operators of criminal fraud based on the raids. Yet the policy hammer, a full funding freeze for the state's child high care program, fell almost immediately. For parents and providers who have done nothing wrong, that feels less like targeted fraud enforcement and more like collective punishment informed by a trending clip. For Somali American communities, it looks like another instance of being cast as villains first, investigated later. From a billionaire investor perspective, the signal to markets is also worrying. If federal policy can shift overnight on the basis of a single viral video, then long-term planning becomes harder. Providers, landlords, banks, and even local governments now have to price in content risk. The chance that a random influencer's narrative, if it catches Trump's eye, can suddenly choke off revenue streams or invite invasive audits. That's not rule of law predictability. That's a political volatility premium. Politically, though, the move may pay off in the short term. For Trump's base, the Minnesota story reinforces a powerful emotional script. The system is corrupt, the elites cover it up, and only outsider truth-tellers and the president are willing to act. When mainstream outlets point out that the video doesn't prove what it claims, that Minnesota already prosecutes fraud, that many centers are legitimate, those nuances can be framed as the fake news defending their friends. The White House doesn't have to win a courtroom case to win the narrative. It just has to show motion raids, freezes, angry press releases, and let the viral video do the rest. In that sense, Minnesota is more than a scandal or a policy dispute. It's a prototype. It shows how the Trump administration is governing in 2025 and 2026, not just by reading intelligence briefings and inspector general reports, but by scrolling a feed of clips that already tell the story the president wants to hear. It shows how a 23-year-old with a camera and a MAGA audience can, in effect, write the opening lines of a federal enforcement action. And it shows how easily the lives of ordinary parents and children can be thrown into uncertainty when politics turns social media narratives into national emergencies. For your channel, that is the core truth to land. This isn't just a fraud story. It's a story about who really runs the agenda now, the bureaucrats, or the people who get 100 million views in a week. In Minnesota, the answer is already clear. The daycare money stopped not after a 400-page audit, but after a 43-minute video.